Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammon's Bogus Hangout. I'm going to have everybody in our hangout introduce themselves and tell us what they're up to for next week or so. Doc?
Doc Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO and Search News Central. And we got 3 days of countdown here to GDPR, so that's what's been occupying 90% of my waking hours for the last few weeks. And it's a real rabbit hole, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So, Richard, introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to.
Richard Ryan. Like I said before we got started, this is my first time being on live with you guys. I've been watching you guys through YouTube. So, yeah. Richard Ryan, nothing planned for next week. Like I said, just happy to be here.
How do I get your job?
And Terry, why don't you introduce yourself?
Terry Van Horn, International Website Builders, SEO Pros, SEO Dojo. Got a million of them. And next week, getting close on a couple of projects and doing some inform JavaScript, updating the fields. That was fun, figuring that out, because I don't do much JavaScript. And the biggest problem was trying to figure out how you add two variables, because it just concatenates them. It doesn't add them up. So it took a bit of digging to figure out the variable stuff. So, but once I got that, it all fell together. And of course, the scripts I started looking at had several hundred lines. When I was done, it was 7 lines. Didn't do the same thing.
Well,
Well, they try and do, something that's very elaborate when all you had to really do was change the value in the form using the DOM and manipulating it. Very simple. Give it a name, an ID, and then update it from there like that. The value in the field, no problem. So got a nice form and figured out a nice way to do my sales on a page now for a couple of sites I'm working on where you'll put together your own package. So.
And I'm Bill Slosky. I'm the Director of SEO Research for Go Fish Digital, and I'm the author at SEO by the Sea. I've been working on an audit for a site and just finished crawling the site this morning with Screaming Frog, and at the end it just kept on going and going and going. I think I might have a spider trap. I'm looking forward to trying to figure out what it is and how to fix it.
Look for a calendar.
Most definitely for a calendar.
It could be. We'll see. So, Terry, you had some questions for me about an article I just wrote.
Yeah. Great. Here's Ammon, too. So, just on time. Yeah, I have been reading your recent post on disambiguation of mobile search and found it voice search, found it very interesting because while that's, as you know, I've been looking at that disambiguation and figuring it out. And, one of the things I find that's kind of neat is that there isn't really what they haven't. Google hasn't really said, right, that there is a knowledge graph for separate for mobile. So I guess we have to assume they're using the same one as the desktop.
It's like Google Analytics. It keeps track of mobile devices, and it has separate information it stores about those. Well, this paper patent I wrote about said we're going to look at things like if the device a query is made from is a portable media device, and the query is something like New York, New York, they probably want somebody to play the song. They're looking for the song. That's what the search intent is. If it's a computer desktop device and the query is New York, New York, same query, but they probably want a web page about New York City.
Right. So it kind of what the patent is saying that they're using parts of the device to kind of play a role in the disambiguation, correct?
Right. They're trying to understand the query, the context of the query.
Right, right.
If somebody's searching from a mobile phone, the same New York, New York, they probably want directions.
Yeah. The other thing I found interesting is that the disambiguation there goes further for voice because there's words that sound alike as well, making it even more complicated.
Right. It reminded me of a Jeopardy problem.
Wow.
Said, okay, so what's words that have the same sound but mean different things are called homonyms?
Right.
Yeah. So they pointed out the word sail, as in sail like a sailboat, or sail like discounted prices at a store.
Yeah.
So when somebody asks for sale information, they may be talking about a boat, or they may be talking about a store.
Right. But also you get the word sell with, you know, if you slur it a bit, they also sound alike.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like that's going to be really tricky to figure out, I think.
There was another patent from Google that said when they run across accents, what they could do is treat the accents as if they were noise. But it's more important that they treat those accents as if they're information.
Be interested to see what they do with someone out of Baton Rouge and get some of that Cajun in there. That's good. They're going to burn up some servers trying to deal with that.
Or some guy who's had way too many, stirring all over the place.
I'll drink to that, Terry.
They may start showing special knowledge panels.
To save time, can you give us a list of the three things you won't drink to, Doc? Might be a lot quicker.
I'll get back to you, Ammon. I'll have to give that one some thought. I will not drink to prohibition. How's that?
Good. Yes, that's a good start.
I was doing some playing around with my daughter's smartphone here 4 or 5 days ago, thinking about this same thing in terms of voice search. And I was kind of impressed. Google does a pretty good job when I'm using terms like you're talking about sale.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't use that one. I can't remember offhand which ones I used, but I wrote down 3 or 4 different types of searches, and then I voice searched them where they could have been, depending upon the other words in the query, might have clarified. And it did a pretty good job.
It may.
Yeah.
I got a speaker device last week, and it had a training session. It asked me to say like 3 or 4 lines. And it was trying to learn my accent, how I spoke.
Wow.
And it's been doing a pretty good job of understanding when I ask questions.
Is that data? Are they capturing that? Do you know, Bill?
They're probably capturing that. It's probably...
that would be almost like a CAPTCHA situation, wouldn't it?
It's another chance for them to continue to understand voice search and the questions people might ask, how they're shaped, how they're formed. Think about all the...
yeah, that's how it is.
We were talking about that before the show started, and I mentioned Google 411, and they had done millions of queries using that and then stopped the program. So using speakers, Google Now, Google Assistant, to capture data and continue to capture it, it's kind of intriguing where they'll go with that at some point.
Yeah.
Interesting, too, to think about. Now, for instance, you're saying it had you read 3 or 4 lines to try to identify your pronunciation of various words. Assuming you're doing that from a mobile device, if you're logged into Google, are they saving that? So that if you go back in 3 weeks from the same device, are they going to still recognize your pronunciation of particular words?
Yes, partly. Certainly, they ask in the terms and conditions, they let you know that they will be storing parts of your data, including voice samples. Microsoft Windows has the same sort of disclaimer, of course, to train Cortana.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do track it a bit. Whether they track it in actual sound files or whether it's in the form of tracking the way you pronounce certain sounds differently, like the way one person pronounces the sound of the letter A is different regionally from another area. Whether they're actually keeping sound files or whether they're keeping sort of equalizer files, I would probably go with the equalizer files. I would bet that they've stripped it down to some kind of raw data format that isn't.
Yeah, that would be more finite. Yeah.
I was curious as to whether or not Google or any of the others were had patented those vocal recognition type results. Siri has, Apple has. So Apple can track up to like 17 different voices. I'm not sure what type of limitations Google might have, but I couldn't find something similar from them about that.
Have you seen it? Go ahead, Terry.
Google, were able to do on-the-fly translation on YouTube. And I forget where I read that, but they were doing that for Hangouts. And it was kind of like that, where it was self-correcting. It figured out stuff. I'm wondering again, like Google is huge for taking all that data and then using that to figure out a way to smooth it all out, if you know, with AI and all that other neat stuff that they do with data.
Last year's Google I/O conference, they showed off Google earbuds, which had translation built into them.
Kind of neat, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Skype started doing stuff of that like that too, where you could actually, in a voice chat on Skype, you can speak English and have it translated to German on the other end. I don't have any idea what the quality was. I haven't used it. I just that's intriguing. You know, you're getting up into that Star Trek Universal Translator type thing. You know,
before Microsoft took over Skype, I had a translation program on the Messenger service that was right on English to Spanish.
Really?
And
oh, that's right. Yeah, you had a girlfriend down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It worked well, eh?
Oh, awesome. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to talk at all.
That's cool. You know, and another question, Bill, I mean, I don't know if you've seen any patents that might touch on it or not. For instance, you know, is Google in voice search, are they liable to pick up on the fact that they're hearing an American versus an Englishman in terms of words used in particular contexts? Like, for instance, if, you know, I would normally ask for restroom or bathroom, Ammon would ask for a lavatory or a WC. Would terms like that potentially be used to identify someone's, you know, likely area of interest or background?
So
It's much more important when you get to words like gas. Because when an American asks for gas, he's wanting to top up his car. When an Englishman asks for gas, he's wanting to heat his home.
Yeah.
I was talking to some guys from India about gas stations and buying gas, and they said, we don't buy gas in India. We buy petrol.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a patent from Google that talks about differences in language and the places people are from, and it uses the example of football.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're from Australia, if you're from the United States, if you're from the UK, you mean completely different things when you say football. And
Canada too.
I shared a link to something that I was watching recently. It's very, very good. Do catch it after this show. But the woman in the TED Talk is talking about language and why we don't like our own voices, but there's an awful lot of information generally on what they can process from little subtle clues in tone of voice, because that's what her company is doing and researching. For instance, did you know you can very accurately predict if somebody is pregnant by the change in their voice? So Alexa may be the one that actually surprises you with news you hadn't known yet. If you're a woman and Alexa suddenly starts, you know, giving you ads that relate to pregnancy, worry. There are all kinds of things. We have so many different voices. We actually use slightly different tones of voice when talking to different people. Very, very specifically, we have a unique voice for each and every person we regularly speak to.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So what they've been able to find is once they've got a good sample of somebody's voice, they can tell who they are speaking to just by determining their voice. They know whether it's their mother, their uncle, their boss, a good friend of theirs, etc. And it's phenomenal what is capable of being processed. And it does make you realize that there may be even more data concerns coming up with voice search than there have been so far. We're opening up a whole new can of worms.
A whole new level of creepy, yeah.
I haven't seen too many patents that talk about voice search, but there is at least one that does talk about getting meanings from stressed words in a conversation and in a question. So if you say that question as opposed to this question, and you stress the word that, it's the type of thing Google may be able to understand. They did announce last week at the IO conference that they're doing continual conversations where you don't have to keep on saying, hey, Google, or started my phone. Okay. Every time you are in a query conversation, you're talking to your phone. I asked for the sports scores on a baseball game, and Google says, I've saved 2 of those to your phone. Would you like to hear the first one? I'd say yes. I don't have to say, hey, Google, yes, play that. I mean,
which of course also means that it is entirely possible that you could be having a conversation with me and Google suddenly decides to issue a search query based upon a comment you made to me, which of course goes into your search history and all that. So, you know, it opens up new privacy concerns for sure. I don't know that I'm really happy to hear that it's listening that much.
You start the conversation with what are known as hot words. So,
like, hey, Google. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, okay, Google. And that's it.
Every time you say Google, it goes off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the wrong career to have something that reacts to OK Google. Let's face it. An SEO should never have that device because every time somebody asks us a question, we say, OK, Google feels like this.
I sort of think as an SEO, you're required to get devices that respond to those. So you learn about them. So you avoid doing that.
It's going to change the business. The way you even, as you said in your article, people may even get in their car and have to get in their car and travel around to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's going to become very interesting over the next 10 years as these devices reach what they're supposed to do, which is to be a permanent little companion and helper that goes everywhere with us. There's always that little voice in our ear.
Yeah.
I worry that it's going to increase isolation, that, you know, having this virtual companion everywhere will increasingly become enough for people, just as social media actually replaced a lot of people's genuine social habits.
Yep.
Instead of going out with friends, they spend more and more time on social media, which we've discovered in dozens and dozens of studies isn't a replacement, doesn't do the same thing at all. And I do wonder whether this assistant is going to do the same thing. We're going to feel like we've got company everywhere. And of course, what we'll actually do is retreat into more and more isolation. Lovely for those who'd like to control us, not so good for us.
Well, and I think that's a very valid concern because there have been some very in-depth studies done even as much as 25, 30 years ago about the effects on humans of prolonged segregation from other human contact rather. And it's not just a matter of getting lonely and forgetting how to act. It's man, there's hundreds and hundreds of subtle impacts it has on the psyche when you're deprived of human contact.
Yeah.
And basically, if you got your face buried in your smartphone all damn day, yeah, you are getting some stimulation from online conversation of a different type, but you're losing an awful lot of stimulation too. And you know what those long-term effects might be is really totally up in the air.
One of my suggestions for people doing local search optimization is to make sure you take a phone and try to get driving directions to a place. Make sure it gets you there. Because sometimes Google has a habit of getting you to the highway out in front of the place and saying, you're there. Say, wait a second, I'm in the middle of the highway.
Used to cut across Lake Ontario, going from Hamilton to Toronto.
Yeah.
Cut across Lake Ontario, a corner of it.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, being a local guide is the new equivalent of being a directory editor was back in the day.
Yep.
You know, once upon a time, if you were an SEO, it was always advised that you become a DMOZ editor, not to give yourself listings, but to understand the inside processes and the considerations that went into it, because you would make better submissions that an editor was more likely to accept. And I think that being a local guide is now that equivalent, where, you know, being able to look at how well things are listed and understand how to get them changed is becoming an essential part of the SEO's job.
I went to a local guide meetup, and the guys who were running it were photographers. And all they could talk about was taking the right photographs of places you visit to get as many views as possible. Because if you took the right pictures, Google would show those as the photos of the place in Google in Street View. When you not in Street View, when in Google Maps, the picture that they show with the place is often the one you want as a local guide to be the one taking that picture, because it can show millions of times that way, many thousands of times at least. And they were so fixated with that, it was amazing. It reminded me of SEOs.
Yeah, Dave and I know one of those photographers. He was as interested in SEO as he was in photography. And he had a few tricks that, let's say when we started in SEO, they were the same kind of things we were looking for.
Yeah.
Image stuffing.
Well, kind of, yeah. His was figuring out how to manipulate the metadata in photos to improve your search. Yeah. And if you can actually,
you talk about the EXIF data?
He just said metadata.
Yeah, probably the EXIF, because I know that I saw something, it's probably been a couple of years ago, what Google does on, you know, when they feel like it, they will look at the EXIF data on a photo. I'm sure they don't look at it often, but in some images, particularly for disambiguation, I'm sure that they do.
If they try to scrape information from a place like Flickr, they might grab that EXIF information and use that to learn more about the places pictures are taken of.
And also to be cognizant of any copyright issues, I would think.
Yeah, he was doing the inside photos of shops and stuff. He was actually a Google partner, I guess they call them. Really interesting guy. Really had been in photography for a long time, and this kind of was his best thing that ever come along for him.
Right. These guys were bragging about how they like to go inside of a place, right inside the door, take a picture of the store from inside, because those tend to get a lot more views than many other pictures. Lots of people would take pictures of outsides of places, but a lot less people would take those immediate in-the-door pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's likely to attract more interest. You'll get better click-through, yeah.
Yeah.
But also the ones that Terry's talking about, they are the ones approved to do the interior mapping, where they can actually go around and create the 3D tour of a premises.
And that is some cool stuff from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
You remember Terry, when Charles Stankovic was showing us his store that way? He just had his store done when he was still out in California.
Yeah, we did that on Telsec too.
That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Basically take a walk around the inside of the shop, you know, and I was wondering if that was even still an active program, because I haven't seen any of that in a long time.
Oh, yeah, they're trying to map whole malls and stuff now. That's still very active.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's a really good marketing tactic for certain businesses as well. Definitely for restaurants, bars, anything where you're going to be selling the atmosphere of a place, well, show the pictures of the atmosphere. But also, one of the things we've probably all seen how competitive it can be is, of course, car sales, whether used or new. Showing your car lot, regularly taking pictures out on that lot is a huge deal to getting more walk-by customers. Huge, because it will tend to be shown more prominently in local search. And of course, if you've got good-looking cars right there where people can see them, people are much more likely to come down and have a look. So if you're in the automotive business and you have a showroom or you have a lot where your cars are out, take pictures of them regularly. Go out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was also interesting. One of the pictures that they had to do for every store was take a picture of the address on the building.
Yeah.
Right. They use OCR on those.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's to verify it also, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, the address.
That was an interesting discussion we had earlier on Facebook, Bill. Was a lawyer was asking whether good coverage, citations without links in newspapers and trade magazines has an effect other than publicity. Does it have an effect in SEO?
Does it help
in
you
any
with
way,
local
shape,
search?
or form?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And citations alone, mentions alone, aren't sufficient. You need at least one link to make sure that your site is determined to be the authoritative site for business. Without that link, Google may not make the connection to your domain.
Yeah, to help with the domain. However, local search, which of course is so important to lawyers, can use NAP citations even without a link, and they can say, okay, this business tends to be talked about a lot, even though it's not linked to, it's talked about a lot, and we know it's this business because it's got the address there.
Yeah.
But as I was saying in that, one of the big issues they have is, of course, consistency and noise. In any kind of signal in SEO, consistency and noise. Being featured in a newspaper is more often a bad thing than a good thing.
How so?
Because newspapers tend to report crimes, gaffes, mistakes, lawsuits, and things like that much more often than they say, hey, this company's doing a great job, the same as it did yesterday, the day before that. If you're doing things right, unless you're doing something incredibly headline making right, if you're doing things right, you don't make the newspaper.
Okay.
So do newsworthy positive things.
So in other words, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those things that also you've got these full page paid editorials. It looks like it's a featured article. It looks like an article, but actually they've sold that. And most of the papers have done that at some time, or they've sold somebody a full page ad, which they've made look like a featured article. And it can be very difficult for any machine to determine the difference, because let's face it, it can be difficult for a lot of people to tell the difference.
Most people.
And I was saying, it's very hard for humans sometimes to know the difference between fame and infamy.
The whole home section on Sunday in North America is all ads. Even what's posed as articles are someone's paying.
It's all sponsored, yeah.
It's all paid. They're called advertorials. Learned that when I was working in real estate.
So I think with newspapers, it's mostly a question of sentiment. How far do you have to get sentiment analysis before you can reliably go through a paper and say, yeah, this is definitely a positive story? No two ways about it. Also, just because your company made headlines for buying another company, does that say something good about you other than that you have money against any of the competitors that didn't buy somebody because they're doing just fine, thank you? It's questionable in value. trade publications ought to be better, but I think you've got a higher chance there of some kind of backroom deal having been done that got them coverage over another company. So I think the fact that it's there is fine, but the noise level, the ambiguity of why they were mentioned makes it a poor quality signal. You can certainly say, yes, this business has been mentioned. You can certainly use it for disambiguation of the entity. But I think it would be very hard to actually take that as a positive or negative citation in terms of reputation, trust, anything like that.
Well, even if you find one of those rare individuals who's willing to engage some critical thinking skills, it ain't easy to tell sometimes, especially if it's an artfully done thing. You know, I was having a conversation the other day with a brother-in-law about review sites. Well, not necessarily review sites like Yelp, but even if you have reviews on your own website, you know, people, if they walk into a business, they feel they were treated badly, got a bum deal or a poor product, they're a lot more likely to make the effort to leave a negative review than the folks that got fantastic service or were just unbelievably pleased with the quality they got for the price they paid. That we're much quicker, on the whole, we're much quicker to badmouth the business than we are to praise it.
Yeah.
So which tells me, okay, then if I go to Yelp, if I see a lot of positive reviews, it raises the question in my mind as to how valid they are. Okay. If I see a lot of negative reviews, I'm more inclined to give credence to the truthfulness of those negative reviews.
Mixed reviews.
With an eye towards, okay, it might be just somebody who's trying to slam the competitor, sure. But I think that is probably human nature, that we're going to go to more energy level expended to bitch than to praise.
Yeah, it's the old saying, if you have a good experience, you tell your family. You have a bad experience, you tell everybody.
Everybody, yep.
Yeah. So the Washington Post would sometimes have special sections in the middle of the paper from countries like China, and they were sponsored. So China would produce all the material inside those sections. And I used to read through them, trying to recognize how much propaganda was going on.
Yeah.
It was all propaganda.
All.
Yeah. I mean, certain states have, you know, bureaus that go through everything and make sure everything is
That's
positive.
what they do. Yeah.
So yeah, at that point it becomes very much like that. And the same with any company, you know, they've all got PR departments they tend to run things by, and legal departments they tend to run things by.
Well, the CIA has a branch that is dedicated to foreign propaganda publishing. I know the British do as well. I think it's MI3. You know, that's what they do, is they place news stories in foreign papers.
Right. So the Washington Post was good for this. They ran an article once showing an empty lot, sort of abandoned looking, and with the caption under it that said, the FBI is considering using this as a new headquarters. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago. They ran a retraction a week later.
Yeah, but the damage has been done.
CIA has already moved in there and taken it over.
That's rich. Oh, Lordy.
That's why I'm kind of skeptical when I see on e-commerce sites where they're taking reviews right when you buy the product on the receipt page, basically. Yeah. To me, you haven't even experienced the whole shopping thing yet. You haven't got the product or anything to actually do a review. All you're really reviewing is the shopping process.
The page, yeah.
And yet Google puts a lot of stock in those.
Well, that's why I told Yelp to go piss up a rope. I'm not in the least bit interested in them for myself or my clients. I'm a lot more interested. I'll put reviews on the website provided that there's a contact name there. You know, if Terry Van Horn of Toronto of International Website Builders said this, then I'll use that.
Yep.
But if Anonymous or Terry in Canada, you know, there's no value in it, either from a credibility standpoint or from a Google standpoint. I think that reviews have very limited SEO value anyway. I'd say limited, not nil, but limited, because there's so much noise, there's so much crap. I don't think that they're going to really tilt the scale a lot. But if there's an actual individual there of this, you know, ABC Corporation who is saying this, I think that means a whole lot more. Whether it be on my website or on LinkedIn or wherever, there's more credibility involved in it.
It's more important when you can put those 5 stars in the search.
Yeah, and certainly from a click-through standpoint too, it's helpful.
Yeah.
But
If you're trying to build pages for locations, and you can include testimonials from people from those areas on certain location pages, and say, this is Terry from Toronto.
That I did on an e-commerce site, works really well. And you also get the location, but also keywords. And it's like user-generated content.
yeah.
Right.
Excellent.
You have them give a testimonial about something unique to that location.
Right.
You can make all the difference in the world. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I feel.
Oops.
Think you're experiencing some audio technical difficulty.
Lag or something, yeah. You dropped out entirely, Ammon.
Believed it. Let's see if it's back.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, yeah. Working for Opinions, the online opinions content back in the day was so important to me because all the reviewers were accountable. You could find out who they were. You could see what else they'd reviewed. And I think that kind of thing is still valuable. I would love to see somebody running a site like that where the end product was actually to create a reviews database that lots of sites could use. So it was shared reviews so that you could know how good a product was, not just on one store, but, across all stores that sell that product. I think that would be...
I actually saw one that was doing that. I can't remember the name right now, Ammon, but I actually saw a program where that's what they were doing. It used the SKU to actually collect all the data and integrate it with other data collected. But
what I found, Terry, is that the ones that are doing it aren't doing enough to qualify the reviews.
They also don't write very good schema, which didn't help either.
Exactly. The point was that you could see a review and then go and check up on that reviewer to see how they reviewed other things you already knew, to see if you felt the same way about things as this person. You could determine whether their sight of things was similar. Do they view things in a similar way to the way I view things?
Yeah, again, a level of credibility. Yeah.
Or where they
this camera was easy to use and wonderful, but unless you check into their background to know, well, how good is their technical knowledge? So they have a video that I found really tricky, and they also say that's great and easy to use. I go, okay, maybe this person has a slightly different thing to me, and therefore maybe their review isn't as relevant to me. So it needs that kind of depth. So one of the things with building a community around it was that you could actually identify which reviews spoke to the most people by how well the reviews themselves were reviewed and rated, and also the ability to, like I say, check into something that this is a popular opinion, But unless you're a soccer mum, it's probably not going to agree with your opinion.
So
Yeah.
the most authoritative reviewer isn't necessarily the best reviewer. The one that people can understand and associate with and feel like they're talking to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also the, paid reviewers that are running around doing negative reviews.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That would be a good way to catch them guys, because you'd see all negative reviews.
Yeah. Back in the day, working for a price comparison site, of course, they had reviews on there, and half of their reviews were completely bogus. I mean, they had an ongoing battle, but they knew that companies were down rating each other left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
Creating fake accounts at home, getting their staff to do so. And yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. Wherever there's a system, people will try and game it. So you have to produce a system that is robust enough and allows enough human oversight on the user end to counter that. It's great that they've given all negative reviews to everyone except one company. A human can look at that and go, "Oh, yeah,
that kind of stands out." Yeah.
yeah." But when you're only seeing that one review out of context, you're not doing that. So, in addition to having the skew to recognise that this review is on a certain thing, you also want something that identifies the reviewer, so that you can go and check their other reviews. And if you're not seeing any positive reviews, you've got a professional negative reviewer.
On that line, I saw something a couple of weeks ago, Ammon, on a site that was talking. It was a site where a lot of discussion in the thread was about review sites. And they said, this guy, little anecdote, he found a reviewer that reviewed 6 different models of SLR cameras that range from $800 to $1,700 each. His personal experience with this camera, and it sucked, and it was slow, and it was sluggish, and whatnot. And then a positive review on this really nice $299 camera. And he checks this kid. This kid is 17 years old, and he just bought 8 $2,000 cameras. Hey, like Terry says, where do I go to get your job?
Yeah. Exactly. And let's face it, if you're shopping around at the 2,000 mark, you don't buy a $250 camera.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, something was wrong there.
But, it's, again, it goes back to using a little bit of critical thinking when you analyze these things. Just because somebody said it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And are you gullible enough that you're going to believe everything that you see just because they put a smiley face at the end of their post? The majority of people seem to be willing to accept that, whether it be on social media or a review site or a website. I can't tell you how many client prospect sites I go to. They've got 16 testimonials on a dedicated testimonial page that just stand out and just scream phony.
Yeah.
And they're all 5.0. There's not a single 4.5 or 4.0 there. They're all top of the scale. And I say, really? You never had a bad customer experience? Well, yeah, but we always make it right. I said, so the guy gets pissed off and he waits until later to put up his review, right? Because they're not editable.
Exactly.
People won't think. It's just easier to abdicate their thinking responsibilities to others.
I always think it's one of those things that companies miss is, look, everyone does get those. You get something goes wrong, it goes badly wrong, you fix it, you make it right. Often your best bet isn't to just make it right, it's to make it really, really right. And ask the guy if you can cover him, if you can, cover that story and say, look, we do get people who things go wrong. Can we cover your story of how it went wrong and how we got around to fixing it? And
absolutely,
you know what?
because
That's great content.
That's a much better measure of the worth of a company's customer service. They all make mistakes, but how do they make it right?
Yeah. And most importantly, even if you make it right, the days when the old Rolls Royce thing was true have changed. There's this famous story about a Rolls Royce that was sold to a guy who used it in Africa, went over some pretty rough roads, and if I remember rightly, the camshaft broke. And Rolls Royce flew over the spare parts, the engineers, and fixed it. And he said, I've never had any service like that to fix it.
And not likely to.
Said, fix what? Rolls Royces do not break. They didn't want coverage for the story. You know, what they wanted is to get rid of the idea that a Rolls Royce had ever broken. Now, back in the day, great story. But these days, people do know that things break, and you do need to take a slightly different stance of not just covering your mistakes, but actually covering your mistakes, i.e. talking about them, showing how it happened, how you fixed it, what you're doing to ensure the same thing can't happen again, and how
that's
any
an important
customer
part,
that does happen to can get in touch with you and get the same level of putting this right.
And again, go back to credibility. I think that's a very important aspect, Ammon. You know, if you have a fiasco that comes about because a bad product or bad service, and you make it right, that's good. And talking about it is good. But also showing other prospective customers that you've taken, you've implemented certain measures to ensure this can't happen again. That gets through to people.
Yes.
They detect that. That establishes a lot of credibility for the company. Okay, they not only fixed the screw up, but they've also prevented future screw ups.
Yep, absolutely. I think almost every blog for a company should have a little forged in fire section, which is about the lessons learned the hard way and how this has made the product and the process better. Because
they've all got them.
Yes.
That's a cool concept. That's almost should be a part of your about page. The things, stumbles, the puddles we stepped in, and how we dried our shoes, that kind of thing. Because every company has screw ups. It's just natural.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's product, sometimes it's service, sometimes it's an unreasonable client. I've always been an advocate of the theory that if somebody goes to your Facebook page and starts bad-mouthing you because they were unhappy with the quality or the delivery or the service attitude or whatever, engage with them and offer them a better than reasonable solution. And if they continue to be trolls, then you can step back because the rest of your audience is going to come to your defense. I love it when the rest of the participants on the page jump in there and say, "Hey, you know what? You're being a dick. They've offered you made a stupid decision. They've offered you a very reasonable solution, and you're still bitching. Go away."
Yeah.
If 3 or 4 people do that, you don't have to say anything else. You've made your point. You've established yourself as reasonable. But the idea of actually showing your ass a little bit, because every company has their screw ups. And how you overcame them or what you learned from them, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Of course, where it goes wrong is there are companies and individuals that if they were to show their mistakes would never stop blogging.
Well, hey, lots of content.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's looking for content ideas, okay?
Thousands of pages of the same damn problem over and over again. You're never going to actually learn.
Mary Ann, bring me volumes 12 through 15 of our fuck-ups file.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine, can't you, if they did an autobiography with an appendix of the fuck-ups, how many volumes of appendix there might be on Donald Trump's autobiography.
Download zip files 1 through 11. Yeah.
But yeah, you're not going to convince people that you're superhuman. What you do is you convince people that you are a superhuman.
There you go.
You make mistakes and you put them right, that you take responsibility. It's much, much more important. And much, much more believable. But also, let's face it, everything you look at is largely a product of lessons learned from mistakes made. The modern railway system was built on every accident that ever happened. You know, the way that signaling is done, all those regulations and rules were created because of an incident that meant something went terribly wrong, and having that rule now prevents that happening again. So every time you look at a really big manual or a big list of procedures, bear in mind every single line of that was caused by a mistake somewhere.
Which is concerning, Ammon, when you pick up a pair of rubber beach thongs at Target and you see the warning label says not for human consumption. You wonder at what point was it necessary to add this warning to this pair of footwear, you know?
Yep.
But unfortunately it is. You know, it's I think it's hopeless to think that AI is going to outpace us soon enough to save us from ourselves. You know, we're going to have to start using some common sense about how we judge. For instance, you know, what is fake news? There's an awful lot of fake news and fake marketing and, you know, absolute false propaganda on everything from political candidates to brands. And we can't depend upon Google or Facebook or, you know, various platforms to identify and filter that for us. We have to do it ourselves. And that means we're going to have to, some point in time, we're going to have to engage our minds a little bit or face the consequences.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry. I know you want to add something to that. you just rolled your eyes at the engage their minds part. I know you did.
Oh, you mean people tell lies on the internet?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Knock me over with a feather.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. People lie on the internet? Oh my God. My faith in humanity is ruined.
Oh, like you ever had any.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, you and I gave up on our faith in humanity.
I'm not saying what I have faith in them to do. Mostly be lazy. Let's face it, human laziness is one of the things you can absolutely bank on.
Investigate that noise. It may be the phone, Bill.
Google doesn't answer your phone for you?
Yeah. Okay, Google, answer that.
And book me a restaurant.
That would be a sweet little digital assistant, eh? Okay, Google, make me a sandwich.
I remember where the spam calls come from. And you did start my phone up by saying, okay, Google.
That is the thing I'm waiting for, actually, is the phone assistant that can handle spam calls for you and keep them talking for ages.
Okay, Google, tell them to fuck off.
There's if you YouTube it, you'll find it, and but there's some lovely automated voice files that are on loops, sound loops, that you can use to answer calls. There's several models that are out there, and they are absolutely brilliant. But I'm waiting for the voices to do the same thing.
That was a phone number from a marketing automation place that keeps on spamming me.
They know not with whom they fuck.
We are coming to the top of the hour, so I guess it's time to talk about what's coming up. Bill, what are you up to in the coming week?
I'm up to some clan calls, which I think should go well.
Excellent. Anything particular to discuss with them, or are you just catching up?
Have some deliverables that are going out to them, audits and reports.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I always do think that it is essential to have a conversation with clients in collaboration with a report, because otherwise it's easy for them to draw the wrong conclusions sometimes, or to place emphasis in the wrong place. I mean, my reports, I tend to have a cover sheet which is here are the top 10 actionables listed in order of importance. This is my recommended order for going through these things, either because they are the most important or because they're a quick, easy win. But this is the order I recommend. But it's always worth having that follow-up, because sometimes they have other things that they haven't let you know about before. Oh, well, we didn't think that would be important. Let's face it, how many times have we all heard that? Oh, I didn't think that would matter.
Really
Yeah. The site's offline for 6 weeks. Oh, I didn't think that would matter.
Yeah, give clients a chance to ask questions if they don't understand something, or if they want a better grasp of it. Let them voice those.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, raise the questions that there were things you didn't bother to put in your report because they're the wrong way, but that's the way they thought something was going to go, because they don't know what. So let them ask, why not do it this way and that way? And you can actually explain the difference, which gives them greater faith in all of the rest of your advice, because they can see not only had you already thought of the things that they raised, but you knew why this was a better solution, and you were able to explain it to them as well.
As a matter of fact, I had a client call about 3 weeks ago where they were asking me things from the Bogus Hangout. There were things that Terry said. Terry,
oh, Lord.
The answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they asked, hey, that guy over there, why is he so pissed off all the time?
Are you picking on Terry again?
Nah.
I'm never pissed off.
We never pick on
I
each
don't know
other.
why you think that. I'm always.
Well, one of us has to rant at least once each show. That's all.
Yeah. So, Doc, what are you up to in the coming week?
Oh, I'm dreading Friday, the 25th, simply because I've got 7 sites that I'm simultaneously trying to get ready for the GDPR rollout. Not so much that I'm worried about Europe suddenly coming down on me with a bomber. It's kind of a credibility issue. I just want to get it done and have it all ready. And every time I turn the page, I find something new that has to be done on one of them.
Yeah, well, as Dave Pipe was pointing out in the comments on G+, you haven't got it as bad as I can have, who have no idea still what they're going to do, because they've just discovered
That it exists, yeah.
That, GDPR means that having all those people with their names, addresses, and phone numbers listed on a publicly open database doesn't meet GDPR standards.
Hey, imagine that, eh?
I know. How weird.
How could you ever determine that would be a potential problem?
And since then, it has been one screw up after another as they proposed ways to mitigate the situation. Either they didn't meet GDPR still, or they were just unworkable solutions.
Well, I actually saw one of the groups on Facebook I belong to, which is all focused on GDPR stuff. One of the folks said that they realized back in March that they had an issue, so they've been working on it. They identified 5 major issues in which they were deficient. So they've had 12 people working on it since March, and now they're deficient in 17 areas.
Yeah,
I can believe that.
And absolutely that. So not only are they still months away from knowing what to do, but then months later for all of their partners to implement those changes.
Exactly.
So they're actually, it could be a year.
And the larger the organization, the longer you can figure it's going to take.
And also, let's face it, ICANN has been in such a position for so long of power that it didn't think it was vulnerable, and I think they thought their name and power alone would carry them, and they discovered that when it comes to fucks, the Europeans don't give one.
Well, I like I said before, I feel like GDPR is doing the right thing. I just don't necessarily think it's doing it the right way.
No.
But protecting people's personal data is important, and there's an awful lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
And the U.S., unfortunately, I think is going to be the last one in line.
Yeah, but luckily, a lot of companies that have international dealings have decided to change their rules across the board because it's easier than having two separate systems, one for how they treat everyone in Europe, and one for how they treat the rest of the world.
That's the position I'm taking. I'm doing it across the board. I'm just going to assume that every visitor is from the EU because it makes a lot more sense to do it one time than to do it later on when Canada and then the US and then Australia. Well, Australia has already beaten us. But, why do it 3 times? Do it once, do it right. It's the right thing. And it's really simpler that way. But anyway, that's what I'm doing for the next 3 days and plus.
Black Hat solution to GDPR. Redirect all visitors through a US VPN so that you can say, well, we detected and all our users had US IPs, so we didn't see it as a necessary thing.
That doesn't cut it, but let me know how that works out for you. That won't do it.
Yeah, we have no European users. We checked the IP addresses. Not one.
Yeah. I can never understand how one jurisdiction thinks they can tell me in another jurisdiction what I should be doing.
Well, I don't know about Canada, Terry, but in the case of the U.S., we have a treaty since 2003 of reciprocity for criminal activity between the EU and the U.S. And since this GDPR is actually not a directive but a regulation, that now constitutes criminal activity.
Yeah.
That was not the intent of that agreement of 2003. They were looking for drug dealers and money launderers, okay? But it does open the door to prosecution and reciprocity under that agreement.
Yeah.
So,
and also,
saying that I'm in Denver and I have local customers only here in Denver, Colorado, does not make you does not give you any sense of invulnerability against GDPR. That's the problem.
Yeah. But it's also, it gets tricky knowing jurisdiction at some points. When a foreign national does something on your soil, do they get prosecuted under your laws? Yes, they do. It doesn't matter that they're not laws in the country of residence if they are laws in the country where they actually did the thing. If somebody steals but they're not from the US, they can still be punished under US law.
Sure. But the other thing is, if a UK citizen were to go to Denver, Colorado, their data is still their data, and as a member of the EU, their data is still protected, even though they gave it to you while they were in Denver.
Where things have always got very tricky is, China and its intellectual property laws, where in China there is no such concept, or rather there wasn't for decades, as intellectual property. Any idea belongs to the people.
It all belongs to the state. Yep.
And so, trademarks and things like this is why, traditionally knockoffs from China, because it wasn't illegal. There was no such thing. You couldn't protect a brand or a trademark because those things had no existence, no real status. Your version was the same as any. If somebody can copy it, they're allowed to copy it.
There you go. And and even from a psychological standpoint, I've known a couple of Chinese nationals that have told me they don't understand that concept.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that it's not prosecutable. Yeah, it's not prosecutable under Chinese law. Aside from that, they just don't understand why in the world any nation would think that the idea of a citizen only belonged to that citizen.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have to go back into the history of why that law came into effect in the first place. And of course, it was actually to make secrets public. The idea behind it was, we will allow you to trademark this and have exclusive use of it in return for you making sure that this goes into the histories of humanity. You have to share it to get the protection. Because without it, people were, keeping secrets. They weren't letting on how they were doing this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And just hoping that nobody else worked it out. The idea was that human knowledge was served by giving people an incentive to share where they still retained their own personal advantage during their lifetime, but after that, it had become part of human knowledge.
So the special secret formula for Coca-Cola or the 11 herbs and spices for Kentucky Fried Chicken, they're safe?
Do you know what? That should have expired decades ago, shouldn't it? And I still think they don't talk about that very much anymore. It used to be the big sales point, you know, the secret blend of herbs and spices. I don't see that on their advertising anymore.
I think that there was a case that got some visibility here several years ago. It used to be that you had a certain lifespan of a copyright or patent or trademark. I don't recall actually, Bill, which one of the three it was that had. I know copyright had a lifespan. I don't remember if trademark and
I think trade secrets are good for the life of
the registrant.
The safe that the secret's in.
Okay. But
there
was
some that are
sort
70 years from point of registration. There are some that are lifetime plus 70 years. I know that
the plus 70, right,
and recording and things like that are often the lifetime of the registrant and 70 years.
Some things expire, like PageRank expired last year.
Yeah.
But there was something, one of those that a few years ago was suddenly, by congressional action, was extended.
Yeah.
Copyright.
Was it copyright?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Disney law.
Yeah. It's funny how sometimes.
In a nutshell, what was it, Bill?
For a particular case.
It was that they extended the duration of copyright repeatedly at the urgings of the Walt Disney Company, who was trying to protect
the cartoon characters. Mickey and Pluto.
I mean, Mickey Mouse should have become public property by now. You know, it's been a long time since the black and white origins of Mickey Mouse.
Under his original name, which was Steamboat Willie, I believe.
Yeah.
When they stole it from the original creator of Mickey Mouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
They lost their money from stuff that went into the public domain. I mean, Cinderella, Snow White.
That's always a very iffy one in the first place, because let's face it, it wasn't their story. Right. You know, at best, it was a. I've lost the word. When you adapt something of somebody else's,
right?
You know, it's dependent on their copyright in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a derivative. Yeah.
Characters are depicted and drawn should be. That would be something new that you could, right?
Well, supposedly, Terry, the old originals of Mickey Mouse, you'll notice that the image of Mickey Mouse, the original, changed considerably to the current Mickey Mouse, and that happened, I'm thinking, in the early 50s, maybe late 40s, and that was supposedly because of a claim that was made against Disney, which they ultimately won anyway, but they changed the image of Mickey.
Yeah, they made him more iconic and therefore much clearer whether something was copying that or just drawing a mouse. You know, if it looks like a mouse, anyone can draw a mouse.
Exactly. That was their argument. You know, how much would you like us to change the image of a mouse, Your Honor?
Yeah. So the much rounder form of Mickey Mouse. I think it was the 40s. Anyway, I think we are past time.
I think we are. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
It's great as always to see everybody.
Yep.